About a decade ago, I worked as a night security guard at a museum. The job was as monotonous as you can imagine, but I desperately needed the money, and the pay was slightly better than any other job I could get at the time. So I thought, why not? After a year in that job, I got a position in construction. I enjoyed that kind of work much more and needed to take back control of my life, as the night shift was affecting my mood and overall well being. The pay was about the same, and even though I had to do more physical labor, the choice was easy. Although I didn't like the job itself, I really appreciated the people who worked at the museum. They were very nice. So I handed in my 2 weeks' notice and said I would stay until they found a replacement. That's when they hired a skinny, pale guy named Rodrigo. The first time I saw him, he seemed like a decent guy, but after a few shifts, I started noticing that he was extremely odd and socially awkward. He had the peculiar habit of changing his tone of voice mid-sentence. It was very weird and made me wonder if he had some kind of mental health issue. Not that I was judging, but anyone who heard that sudden shift in tone would understand my concern. He didn't seem dangerous, just different. On the third or fourth night I was training him, everything seemed normal. Rodrigo was depressed, clearly sad. I could tell easily since he wasn't making any effort to hide it. As we did the usual patrol around the museum, a long walk to be honest, I asked why he was so down. He replied that he felt lonely and couldn't get a girlfriend. If you looked at him, you'd understand why. Besides his appearance, his personality was also peculiar. I tried to cheer him up, telling him there were plenty of fish in the sea and suggesting he try online dating. At the time, it wasn't very common. He just shrugged and kept that sad look on his face. Over time, he became even weirder. One night, he gave an endless speech about the environmental impact of pizza crusts. Yes, you heard that right. Pizza crusts. It was so absurd that I wondered if he was joking. When I tried to interrupt him to ask if he was okay, he completely ignored me. When you're alone in a huge building with someone else, their mental state becomes crucial. I started feeling uncomfortable and, honestly, unsafe around Rodrigo. He seemed to be losing touch with reality. Luckily, my last shift with him was only moderately weird, and I moved on to my new job. Months later, I had completely forgotten about Rodrigo when I got a message from a colleague at the museum on Facebook. She asked me what I thought of the guy who replaced me. I was honest and said he was really strange. She then laughed and said, "You're going to love this story." She told me that Rodrigo had been fired after completely destroying an exhibition during his night shift. When the staff arrived in the morning, they found him trying to put the piece back together. Security footage showed that he had literally fought a dinosaur skeleton. The most concerning part? They found out he was on antipsychotic medication and had apparently stopped taking it. My friend didn't know more details, but it was enough to make me wonder if Rodrigo had already been off his meds when we worked together. That experience made me realize how dangerous it is when someone stops taking essential medication. One thing I know for sure, I'm glad I never ran into Rodrigo again. I work at a regional supermarket. I'm 26 years old, have a degree in psychology with a master's, but I still haven't been able to find a job in my field. Due to family circumstances, I couldn't pursue a PhD, which is the minimum requirement for a well-paying job. Because of that, I ended up feeling a little lost. I even struggled to find a regular job. I applied for several lower-level positions, but was repeatedly rejected because they said I was overqualified. They claimed I would get bored and, for that reason, wouldn't hire me. That was incredibly frustrating. When my student loan payments started becoming due, and I really needed money, I ended up asking my cousin's friend for a job. He was the manager of a regional supermarket, and the only available position was for shelf stocking on the night shift. I couldn't believe it. I felt so ashamed, like I had wasted years of my life and thousands of dollars in debt just to end up with a job anyone could do. The job itself wasn't that bad. I could listen to my favorite podcast while organizing the shelves. I had been working there for about a year when a major change happened. The supermarket used to close at midnight, but for some reason, they changed the policy to operate 24/7, except for holidays and Sunday nights. That was a big blow because my quiet time listening to podcasts and stocking shelves was constantly interrupted by customers asking where things were. I didn't mind helping, but many asked about obvious things, and I kept wondering, are they blind or just lazy? However, one night, a very strange man appeared. He had bulging eyes, a round body, and a nose covered in hair, as if he had pulled strands from his head and glued them to his face. I was kneeling, organizing a shelf of pickles, when I felt someone touching my hair. I had tied it in a ponytail that night, and he stroked the part that was hanging down my back. I immediately pulled away and asked what he was doing. He tried to play it off, saying he had arthritis, but I knew he was just being a creep. I asked him what he wanted, and he stayed silent for a moment, as if thinking about what to say. Then he uttered a single word, "You." He stepped even closer and started sniffing my hair. It was beyond uncomfortable. I had never felt so disgusted. I told him that if he didn't need any help, I had work to do, but he didn't leave. He grinned sinisterly and suddenly hugged me, saying, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll take care of you." My blood ran cold. This man was crossing every possible boundary. I pushed him away and ran to my manager, who was a big guy and could handle him if necessary. The man followed me, but as soon as he saw my manager coming down the aisle, he must have changed his mind because he turned around and started running. I explained to my manager what had happened, and he said he would take action if the man ever returned. And he did. He waited a few weeks for everyone to forget about the incident. I wasn't expecting to see him again, but there he was. That night, I was organizing a shelf as usual when suddenly I felt someone yanking my hair hard. It hurt my neck. Before I could understand what was happening, he dragged me across the floor. I only realized who it was when I looked up, the same man. He dragged me for about 30 feet toward the exit before anyone saw what was happening. It wasn't my manager who saved me, but a coworker. She started screaming and ran toward him. For some reason, that scared him, and he ran away again. I was in shock. He was really trying to pull me out of the store by my hair. What kind of lunatic does that? After that incident, the store owner finally understood that we needed security if we were going to remain open at night. They hired a security guard, and I felt much safer. I'm still looking for a job in psychology and hope to find one soon. But after all of this, I felt like I really needed a break. It was one of those cold March nights when the freezing wind seemed to cut straight to the bone. I had just finished an exhausting shift at the hospital, where I worked as a janitor. The hours were brutal, but the job was honest and dignified. Usually, the drive home helped me unwind. The quiet route brought me a sense of peace I had grown accustomed to. I didn't realize my gas tank was nearly empty until the warning light on the dashboard started flashing. At that hour, there weren't many options, so I pulled into the first gas station I could find. The place looked rundown, but it was open, and that was all that mattered. The dim lighting flickered from a few struggling bulbs barely doing their job. The fuel pumps were old, and the only other vehicle in sight was a rusted pickup truck parked to the side. I pulled up to the nearest pump and stepped out to refuel, shivering as the cold cut through my jacket. As I grabbed the gas nozzle, I noticed a man emerging from behind the station building. He wore a clean, well-pressed uniform. I assumed he worked there, though I hadn't seen anyone inside when I arrived. He smiled as he approached, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, too forced, as if he were trying to convince me of something. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice smooth but oddly unnatural. "No, I'm fine. Thanks," I replied, trying to act normal, though something about him unsettled me. He wasn't dirty or disheveled, as you might expect in a place like this. His uniform was spotless, and his hands were too clean. Nothing about him matched the setting around us. He just stood there watching as I hurried to finish refueling. When the pump clicked, signaling the tank was full, he took a step forward. "I can check your oil for you, free of charge," he offered, already reaching to pop the hood. "No, really, I'm good. Thanks," I said quickly, trying to stay calm. He didn't move. "Are you sure? Your car seems to be running a little rough. I wouldn't want you stranded on a night like this." His insistence made the tension inside me tighten. I forced a smile, telling him I needed to get home. As I replaced the gas cap, he stepped closer, now less than a meter away. His gaze flicked toward my car's trunk. "I'll just take a quick look under the hood," he said, already reaching for the front of the vehicle. That's when my brain went into full alert. "No, seriously, I have to go," I said firmly, taking a step back. He hesitated, his hand hovering in the air. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity, and then he smiled again. But this time, the smile carried weight, like it was hiding something dark. His other hand slipped into his pocket. My heart pounded. Without thinking, I yanked the car door open and jumped inside. He didn't yell, didn't try to stop me. He simply started walking toward the driver's side, his hand still in his pocket. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, reversing hard. The tires screeched, nearly knocking over a water barrel. I shifted gears and sped off, not even bothering to put on my seatbelt until I was far enough away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. In the rearview mirror, I saw the man standing at the edge of the station's light. He didn't run after me, didn't make a sound. He just stood there, watching, his hands still buried in his pocket. The 20-minute drive home felt like an eternity. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights following me. When I finally reached my house, I sat in the car for a moment, trying to steady my nerves. The house was eerily quiet, but I forced myself to go inside and lock every door, even the ones I usually ignored. That night, I barely slept. At work the next day, I told a coworker what had happened. "Always trust your gut," she said. "If it feels wrong, it probably is." 2 days later, during a break, a news article froze me in place. A man was wanted for involvement in multiple abductions. The description matched exactly the man I had encountered. A spotless uniform, a fake smile. He had convinced a woman to let him help with her car at a gas station just a few miles from where I had been. She wasn't as lucky. Her car was found abandoned in the desert. She was still missing. That same day, I went to the police station. Fear clung to me, but determination was stronger. I told an officer everything, the forced smile, the too clean uniform, how he tried to open my hood. He took down every detail and promised to investigate. Since that night, one rule has changed my life. I never stop at shady gas stations again. I also keep a small gas canister in my trunk. A simple precaution, but one that gives me a little peace of mind. Even now, I get chills when I pass gas stations at night. But I also know the value of listening to my instincts. They can save lives.